Hey, how's it going, guys? Hey, Chad. Hey, Luigi. And hey to everybody else.
Hey guys,
Hey guys.
nice to be here. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Luigi. Should be a fun
You too.
space. Hope everyone's doing well despite craziness.
Yeah, I hope you all are okay. And yeah,
Yeah, everything's good over here. I don't think anyone has any kind of exposure to any of that craziness that's going on in CFI lands.
Yeah, I had a tweet about that, how every project right now, everyone's asking about like treasuries and stuff, and I'm like, nobody even asked THORChain, THORSwap. Didn't see the question a single time. Just the ethos runs too deep in the THORChain world.
Yeah, man, it's cool to meet you. I'm interested to learn a little bit more about like other other DeFi projects on Avalanche and talk a little bit about THORChain today. We keep it pretty casual, and we'll also let people from the audience just come up and ask questions if anyone requests and like has a question for Luigi or for us or whatever. Like these are pretty open, so we try to let people up, and yeah, we'd like to talk about DeFi, about THORChain in particular, but um, we're just students of the space and like to just learn more about everything that's going on here and also like share what we're building. So also sorry that today is a US holiday. So if you need to dip out at any point and go do something else, then no problem. But so we appreciate you joining us too.
yeah, of course. Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh yeah,
um,
sure.
yeah, no, happy to be here and happy to have the discussion with the THORChain community and talk about kind of whatever's on everybody's mind. I know that obviously the events of this week are fresh, but I'd love to go wherever you guys see fit.
Yeah, sure. So I guess what are your so like what are some of your thoughts about just DeFi coming out of all of this? Because I mean, does that change the narrative at all for DeFi versus like these centralized services, and not just FTX, but all these like centralized like lending and borrowing programs and like it you know I think it just puts DeFi in a completely different light and just like kind of shows that what we're doing here is just a lot more transparent than these centralized organizations. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway from all this, to be honest with you. A lot of what failed was really the worst of TradFi and the worst of DeFi put together in a packaged box and effectively sold to people in a way that was sort of disingenuous. But in terms of like TradFi, if you're going to have a centralized black box entity, it does need to be regulated. If you're going to have, in terms of DeFi, if you're going to have a completely open and transparent um, sort of financial protocol, then, like I said, it needs to be open and transparent. And if it's centralized um, and not regulated, that's not good. If it's open, it doesn't need to be as regulated. At least that's my opinion. So I think that this puts DeFi in a very interesting spot. The last bear market, I remember very well. There really wasn't much to do in crypto. Um, User experience is pretty poor. People were just trading crypto kitties, and now I think it's the opposite. It's pretty delightful experience to do things on chain, at least from my perspective. Can it get better? 100%. Like, do we still have a long way to go? Yes, but you know, being able to borrow and lend against your assets, swap them, bridge them, do interesting options trades, uh, trade perpetuals. This is like a massive improvement from where we used to be, and I'm hoping that this is the catalyst for people to start swapping assets on chain more often rather than using something like FTX. Um, Low, and I tell people all the time, like, if you execute a trade on chain, all that really happens is there are arbitrage bots that are taking that trade and arbing it on the centralized exchange. So if liquidity, for example, gets deeper on chain, essentially also makes liquidity deeper on order books off chain, as long as there's arbs connected to those centralized exchanges. So we now need to push DeFi harder. We need to be more transparent. We need to also do our best to appeal to people who are not as financially savvy, right? And I think that's one of the reasons that Celsius, FTX did well and sort of got more traction than something like DeFi, because it felt very Web 2. And, we want to find a way to bridge that gap of having the non-custodial nature and transparency of DeFi, but, not putting people through a maze to be able to use it. So those are like kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, it's just so unfortunate that this kind of puts a scar on crypto when the problem itself is really a TradFi problem. It's an old system problem. It's exactly what DeFi solves for, with self-custody, with transparency on chain, all the things that get us excited. That last thing you were touching on is exactly what I wanted to ask you. So how do you think about UI, UX in DeFi? Like what do you feel is like still missing, even in just self-custody too? I mean, that's kind of like the first phase of the problem, getting people off of stuff like FTX. But, like that's the exact same problem that like we think about all the time in our space, and just trying to really replace the centralized exchange as a whole. And even what you touched on with like deepest liquidity and arbs, maybe there's a day where THORChain kind of is that main reference point rather than a deep liquidity on a centralized exchange. That's kind of like the long-term huge goal. But yeah, curious just your thoughts on like where does UI UX go from here to really make DeFi enticing enough to get those more regular users?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging question. I do think that the answer is twofold. Part of the issue is literally just getting people more educated on using a wallet, because a lot of people just want to obfuscate away the non-custodial part of crypto, and I think you can't really fully do that. So we need to keep the core principles of why we're here, but we do need to find so to kind of like just come full circle on that. So we need to educate people more on how to use wallets, and then what we need to do is we do need to find ways for using crypto wallets to not be so, I guess, finite. MPC is an interesting technology. I'm not sure if it's the best or not, but at a minimum, it does allow you to kind of share keys with people and have recovery and things like that. And that's important, right? So a lot of times I liken, a crypto wallet to having cash in your wallet. So it's great because, if you're anywhere, you can, give somebody cash and buy something or whatever. But you wouldn't be typically carrying around $1 million in your wallet, in your back pocket. So being able to delineate, the difference between petty cash and being able to just do things very easily, and also being able to have sort of like a bank account, which could be like a Gnosis safe or whatever, that allows you to store assets in a more non-custodial way that's safer and be able to access them. You do both.
Oh, sorry, it was cutting out a little bit towards the end there. Interesting. No, I'm curious, like expanding on that a little bit. What are some of the projects that are coming out of Avalanche right now that you're looking, like in DeFi specifically, that are trying to accomplish these things, like be it wallets, dexes, just other DeFi protocols and platforms that are on Avalanche right now? Like, what is it that you're seeing evolve?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot going on in Avalanche DeFi. I'm pretty excited about. So some of it is released, and some of it is still is close to being deployed, and have been working on projects for a long time. So we have a native stable swap called Platypus, which is an interesting application. Trader Joe is one of the leading dexes who will be launching sort of like a version of Uniswap v3 in terms of concentrated liquidity. They'll be launching that next week. Actually, it's going live. It's called Liquidity Book. So that's really cool. There's custom strategies. There is dynamic fees, which is different from Uniswap v3, so it does protect LPs a little bit more. And then there's also the system's a little bit more flexible in terms of not using NFTs as positions. So they use ERC 1155s, which is a little bit more composable. So excited to see that go live next week. We have a bunch of different native projects under development right now. Delta Prime is like an under collateralized lending platform, which is sort of similar, I guess, in some ways to Gearbox. There's some nuances there though. So that's a native team that's been building for a year. Steadify is building a really cool automated vault strategy. Excited to see that. And same with BWS, which is cool. We have a bunch of different applications like Cavalry, which are under development that build really advanced AMMs and financial primitives. There's some structured product apps like StructFi, which is building sort of like, I guess, quasi interest rate swap protocol. So we're really trying to push for the, I guess, sophistication of DeFi at this moment. We're trying to get, very savvy financial people to come build DeFi primitives. And that's our focus, because a lot of what DeFi is building in terms of the finance component need not really change that much. It just needs to be transparent, open, and non-custodial. So that's kind of a bunch of the stuff we're focused on, and that I'm very excited about.
Awesome. And I know you mentioned Trader Joe's. I didn't hear anything about Pangolin, but those are just two of the very interesting dexes that are on Avalanche that the THORChain community has been working with the past couple of weeks on this concept of dex aggregation. I don't know if you've explored at all this concept of dex aggregation, but it's something that THORChain's been working on for months now, and it's this concept of just chaining together swaps from these from these liquidity pools on different interfaces. So obviously you have all this Avalanche on the C chain, on Pangolin you have all these other these long tail assets on things like Trader Joe, and when you combine that with other dexes, it makes it really interesting to be able to swap cross chain to these long tail assets that might not have liquidity on one dex, but you can chain together these trades and make it easy for a user. So one of the things that is already live with Pangolin on THORSwap right now with their dex aggregator is just chaining together these trades. So trading native Bitcoin, it goes through THORChain, and then it comes out on the other end, into a contract. It goes into Pangolin, and then get swapped to whatever long tail asset.
Yeah, Pangolin's another strong
Concept of
project
dex
on Avalanche.
aggregation, something that yeah.
Oh, sorry, you got cut off a little bit.
Sorry, I got a call. It was really, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I hate when Twitter Spaces rugs whenever you get a phone call. But yeah, Pangolin's a strong project. GMX, Yieldiac, all these other ones too. But in terms of dex aggregation, that's kind of one cool thing I think about Avalanche. We have really different types of dexes too. So in the aggregator, one thing that could be possible for something like THORSwap and dex aggregation is we also have sort of interesting dexes that are not the traditional Uniswap v2 ones. So, Penguin is similar to that in a lot of regards. Uh, Trader Joe's first version is Liquidity Book will be different. But we also have things like WooFi and GMX and Platypus and et cetera. And for the user, being able to route that trade to the best venue is incredibly valuable. So, I think you mentioned native Bitcoin. One of the one of the cool things I like about what we've been pushing is this native BTCB asset on Avalanche, which is obviously bridged directly from Bitcoin blockchain to Avalanche. So, being able to kind of put all these pieces together and use an aggregator, I think is really important. So I think it's really cool what you guys have done, integrating into the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it ties in well with your last point, just like all these other projects that are popping up. And with DEX aggregation, like there's a direct path from native Bitcoin or ETH, Atom, etc., everything else, like all the way directly into a complex Avalanche new gen project, right? Like it's a really cool entry point where AVAX projects could target liquidity from outside of Avalanche chain by using something like DEX aggregation. I agree with what Cow was saying. Definitely, DEX aggregation is something we've been super excited about, and it's really cool to see it live. Right now on THORSwap, it's pulling liquidity from just Pangolin, which is already giving like better routes for like actually saving users, giving you better outputs on like stable coins and stuff like that than even just using straight through THORChain, which is really cool. But then, in the next like week or two, it's going to do Trader Joe, at least the first version. I am curious about the liquidity book thing. I'll see if the team is looking into that. But that could be cool. Platypus as well. But Trader Joe and 1inch are right around the corner as well. So it'll direct through the best output path for the user.
Also brought up Chad Barraford. He's the technical lead of THORChain, so I just wanted to call that out. Hey, Chad.
Good day, mate.
All right, he's not Australian or English or whatever.
Yeah, it's good to have Luigi. It's good to have you here and talking all things AVAX. We were very interested and very excited to get AVAX integrated into the THORChain ecosystem and collaboratively, benefit each other's projects and bring more liquidity to you and bring more liquidity to us in a sense. And so really happy to have you here and talking more things about AVAX.
Yeah, appreciate it. One thing that in the future could be really interesting, it's starting to bubble up now, but over time I think will be important for something like THORChain, is the Avalanche subnets in particular. And I think one of the reasons you guys have focused on a lot of ecosystems, but also Cosmos, is because there's an opportunity to connect chains. Avalanche subnets, for anybody who doesn't know, is the way that Avalanche horizontally scales the network by growing into new chains, and it's a little different than Cosmos, and there's a lot of different nuances that I don't think we have to go through right now. But I would say like it's definitely an opportunity for something like THORChain to connect those in the future too. So just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Yeah, we could do that potentially into the future. The one kind of thing we have to be conscious of as we kind of expand is that unlike a DEX like Pangolin or any of these other ones where you have more or less unlimited security given to you, so the amount of assets you can hold is just like it's not bounded. You can have $1 trillion theoretically, and everything would be more or less from a security perspective be fine. But THORChain doesn't have that kind of nicety. It has to ensure that all the assets are secure relative to the bond that is being secured. So we have to think about, we only have so much assets that we can actually hold in the network in terms of like dollar value, and we can be very conscious about like where do we want to put that security? Is it going to be to add more chains within the AVAX community, or is it going to be to add new chains or new ecosystems entirely? And that's going to be a debate that the community has to kind of wrestle over and fight over for the coming years.
That's a good point. I do think that and just giving a little bit more insight. So the subnet model is very flexible, meaning the amount of validators you can have on different subnets is completely customizable, variable depending on the use case. So I do envision a scenario where the C chain, in a lot of ways, retains a ton of the liquidity, but the subnets in particular are able to trade from their subnets and access that liquidity. So you guys being integrated with the C chain would allow you to have access to all that liquidity regardless, and could provide additional opportunities. So I don't think it's an either or anyways.
If you wanted to move between one chain to another with an AVAX, like, is that supported, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we're very excited about. So we've just released the BAMF upgrade, which allows for elastic subnets. Elastic subnets will allow you to effectively have permissionless validation of each subnet. You can pull any number of any different variety of the 1 to 1400 Avalanche validators to come validate your subnet. Now, what this allows, in terms of the way we designed and constructed it, it allows for trustless communication between the subnets in particular, and the way that that's going to occur is because all the validators are known to each other via the Avalanche P chain. There's a unique sort of difference in architecture that allows each subnet to communicate to each other via arbitrary messaging. Now, this isn't live right now, to be very clear and transparent. This is under development, and we hope to release it sometime early next year, and that will allow for communication between subnets. And yeah, so that's how they'll communicate. So effectively, if you're on subnet A and you want to communicate to the C chain, right? Let's say the liquidity is on the C chain and you want to swap it as a user via subnet A, you can send arbitrary messages and sort of create a nice user experience on top if you so want to develop it.
So with the so is it going to kind of be a bit similar to like the Stargate design and implementation, where there are similar
not
tokens?
Pools.
So
it won't be a pool and bridge. No.
So these validators have to hold asset A on chain A and asset B on chain B, and then they move value between those two. How does that work? I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, it's not like that. It's much more similar to IBC. There's some very different design choices, I think, and nuances to kind of how it's architected, but the end game is effectively what IBC enables, where you go from one zone to another, and the validators store like sort of every state interaction.
Yeah, but the IBC implementation creates wrapped assets from one chain to the other, from the source to the target, and then it relies on the validators of the target chain to not YOLO and take whatever value that has been given to them as validators, to hold on to the value of the other chain, whatever the other asset from the source chain is. So that's like the same here as well, or that differently structured?
Well, I guess it depends on how you build on top of something like IBC, right? So if you have, I mean, I'm not the Cosmos expert, but for the Avalanche in particular, if you have the C chain, let's say there's a pool on Pangolin with, I don't know, Avox USDC pool or something like that, and you're on subnet A, and you have Avox on subnet A. Yes, you got it there via bridging via this subnet communication protocol. But if you want to swap it, you can swap it via that liquidity on C chain, but sort of, I guess, obfuscate a lot of the user experience of bridging because liquidity is there, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to get down to the bottom of whether it was being bridged or somehow like, like how the value was actually being transferred from one chain to another. Because that's something that, is considered a lot in the THORChain space. Because, we think about these like wrapped assets versus the native assets on the native chain. And it's like, there's a large difference between having, Bitcoin in a Bitcoin wallet versus, WBTC on in your Ether wallet, or so I think that's just
Yeah. I think
that's part of the concern, like
I
for
think
this
in
community,
general.
especially with IBC, is like that transfer of value from like when you bring it from one chain to the other, there's still the underlying, but then there's also the IOU on top of it. So that's just kind of where that's coming from.
Right, because if things are
There's
not
always an
economically
IOU.
secured,
There's always an IOU. Yeah. For here, there's always
yeah,
IOU.
that's I think right, right. But if things are not economically secured, it means it's secured by somebody who's behaving altruistically in some sense or form, and sometimes that's much more like that somebody is much more diverse and much more decentralized in other cases. Like WBDC is obviously like a centralized company, and same thing with BUSD, centralized
Yeah.
company. But then there's other things like IBC is probably one of the better designs, because in order to rug that situation, you have to like run the majority of the validators, majority of not even the validators, majority of the capital that's running the validators in order to rug that system, which is much better than like trusting CZ or like some random, handful of like some 3 or 4
Exactly.
multi-sig somewhere in the world. So it's much better in that approach. But still, you have to rely on those individuals who are running those validators to not rug the system and walk away with a bunch of value.
That's right. I think that's the right way to put it. That is the risk. In a lot of ways, because on Avalanche, in order to validate a subnet, you must also validate the primary network. There is a little bit more, I think, security there because the validators of the subnet are also rugging themselves in some way if they if they try to rug the C chain. So in a lot of ways, it's similar to IBC, but with some different nuances. So I think it's an improvement versus a third party bridging solution that's out there. But it's native to Avalanche protocol. To be clear, this isn't something that's going from subnet A to Ethereum, for example.
Right.
What about other cross-chain interoperability solutions on Avalanche? I'm like, I know you guys have your own Bitcoin bridge, which has been doing spectacularly, by the way. I've been looking at the amount of Bitcoin that's been bridged over, and that's been growing like really nicely. What other kind of interoperability solutions are there in the Avalanche ecosystem? And like also like how do you think THORChain plays into that being like a native asset exchange rather than like a bridge of sorts?
Yeah. I think that we have. I guess we run the gamut in terms of all the cross chain solutions that are out there in the market right now in terms of what's on Avalanche. So there's your usual suspects. There's like Layer Zero, Axelar. I think there's Hop, Seller, all these different solutions, Synapse, etc. So they're all deployed on Avalanche, and they're connecting Avalanche to other chains as well. I think, and this is what I tell people all the time, is like the bridging and movement of assets across chains is a very new space because I think a lot of people forget that the first real quote unquote cross chain interoperability that was happening at scale was like, I don't know, early 2021. Maybe a little bit, maybe a little earlier than that, but like at scale, not like the first
So
happened.
what was that one?
And
You
did I
cut out
cut
there
out?
for a second there. Can you say that again? I missed it. Yeah, say it again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I was just saying that the first cross chain sort of uh, uh, solutions that happened at scale were really early 2021. And so the space is still very new in terms of moving assets across chain. And I think that technology is only going to get better. And I think, all these different projects are going to continue to iterate and improve. And, I'm excited to kind of see that happen. Like THORChain, for example, with its native its native asset movement is like unique in a lot of ways, and very different than all the other projects out there. And I think that, as you guys continue to iterate and that community continues to iterate on what you've built, it's only going to keep growing and only going to keep getting better. And I just like to remind people, the L1 space, for example, from 2017 to now is massively different in terms of technology and possibilities. And I think we'll see the same sort of improvement in cross-chain interoperability as well. So it's just important to remember how young even going cross-chain is. Like, people weren't doing that in 2018 or 2017 in a big way.
Well, I mean, they were doing it in a big way within the context of like centralized systems, like Binance.
Yeah, for sure.
But in the context of decentralized systems, like, yes, that's relatively very new. Even like before THORChain launched its first, alpha, Ren protocol ran their thing. But even Ren was like very centralized. Like, they ran all the nodes and all the infrastructure themselves, and so they had access to all the funds. Which for me, that just makes it just another way of doing CeFi. But yeah, today, like, it's getting better. We still got a long way to go. I mean, I still think that like a lot of people who are coming into the space and doing cross chain are doing it in a very centralized way, and it's very, very, very few that's actually doing it like properly decentralized, properly secured, and that kind of thing. That we don't see as much, unfortunately. I wish we'd see more of it. To be honest with you, it'd be healthier for the industry if we did. But it's because the problem to do it in a decentralized way, it's extremely complex and extremely difficult. It's not something you can just throw together in a month or two. There's not as many people actually doing it. Even like in like Layer Zero's approach, where they're basically the arbiters of everything. Like, again, that's obviously another centralized approach of doing it, and it's just not really actually accomplishing the goal of being a decentralized way to move value across chain A to chain B. I would love to see more people do it though, because that would just be great for the industry.
Yeah, I think we sort of see the same thing in the layer one space too. There's a bunch of layer ones, some more centralized than others, some just forced to be on, based on technology, right? Like their consensus protocols, for example, just can't scale past something like 100 nodes. So, and that from that perspective, there is entities there. So I just think, that the space is going to grow. There's going to be the winners, there's going to be the losers. And, I think maintaining a focus on decentralization while not compromising on UX is going to be incredibly important for cross-chain interoperability, for chains, for DeFi, for the space to grow. Like, we cannot deliver an inferior product and just say it's decentralized, in my opinion. Like, that'll only keep the space a niche.
Yeah, we need to deliver the products that people are actually going to use and find useful, but then also have those elements of decentralization that make them capture resistant, censorship resistant. Those are the principles why people get into this space, but people also want good UX. I think one of the problems, one of the bigger issues in the cross-chain space, at least from the THORChain angle of this, is managing multiple wallets on multiple chains and connecting them to one site to do swaps and things like that. Like that is a space which is so underexplored right now. Just managing multiple wallets across blockchains, and there's a lot of people that are working on that on those solutions, but it's just not something where the UX is like up to. Even like an advanced crypto user will run into issues. I'm sure a lot of people here have run into issues just using wallets on interfaces, just because it's complex, especially when dealing with multiple chains that all communicate differently. It's just one of those areas to really like button up the user experience end of things, and like where the product is already good, but it's just like the couple little tweaks can just make the UX so much better, and bring more adoption and usability to the products themselves.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's one of like the main holdups, and makes me curious. Like with BTCB on Avalanche. One, can you maybe explain just kind of for the THORChain people that are so used to native assets, like how that operates, and then also like, do you feel that if the UX problem that Cal was just describing was solved, that like the Avalanche community cares about native Bitcoin? Like would they like is that difference understood between using BTCB on Dexes and whatnot in the Avalanche world versus just like being able to have a multi-chain wallet and like come from native BTC?
It's a very good question. I think some would care, but I think what you know, if anything, the last week and the last months have showed us is that most people didn't care, frankly, and that's quite obvious. Most of the users didn't care. Like if you were okay to getting paid in your CEL token on Celsius, and keeping your money in there, like I don't think you really, or you didn't know, and I don't know what the difference is to delineate at the moment, but um, I think that for sure is part of the issue, and that's why I always say like we need to deliver decentralized products that are better products too, because I don't think that the majority of people in the world are going to look this deep, unfortunately. Um, so I think that's our calling in terms of BTCB. That is the Avalanche bridge, for example, which is the one that bootstrapped the Avalanche ecosystem, right? It was deployed originally to Ethereum, still is, and that allowed for certain assets to move over, like ETH, for example. And one of those assets was wrap Bitcoin, and we instead we deployed the bridge to Bitcoin directly, which uh, sort of removed one of the central points of I guess centralization in terms of wrap Bitcoin. So now you can. There's a few things I think it does quite nice. One, you can have a Bitcoin wallet and move your Bitcoin to Avalanche. Bridge it to Avalanche directly, which is nice. It does remove sort of the that wrap Bitcoin has, or some of them. So it's not a KYC custodial product. It doesn't require merchants to redeem and create the asset. So if you, for example, need to redeem your BTCB to Bitcoin, you can just bridge it back. It's in a manner that doesn't require any KYC or people to go to some vault and get private keys, etc. Um, so from that perspective, I think it solves some of the issues that wrap Bitcoin has. But it still is a bridge, to be very clear. So there are risks. A lot of times I say to people, when you drive on like the Verrazano or a bridge, I get a little woozy no matter what. And I sort of feel the same way when you use crypto. But things like native asset bridging and kind of what THORChain is undertaking, hopefully can bring us to a much better outcome.
Yeah, I think one of the visions that I have personally for like DeFi in general is the hope that we can start thinking about DeFi as a chain agnostic system. Like if we've kind of grown up thus far with DeFi being associated and built upon a particular ecosystem, whether that be AVAX or Ethereum or what have you. We build tools for that particular ecosystem, but then we want to service assets that are external to that system. So then we build bridges and wrapped assets and all these other kind of things, which is just increases risk and increases like potential issues. But rather building DeFi that is not associated with any particular ecosystem, that this works the same, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's AVAX, whether it's this, whether it's that, and just structurally puts this DeFi protocol in a way that is fundamentally available to effectively any asset without taking on additional risk of wrapped or like this kind of stuff, or like bridges, which are like, for me, bridges are very problematic in general, just because they take on both the CeFi risk because they are like centrally managed by some degree, and they also take on the DeFi risk of being some sort of exploits in their contracts or exploits in their code that could drain the entire system. And in many bridges, we've seen CeFi things happen where like that dev from I think it was Ronan, I think it was, he had like got all of his keys stolen through like a malicious PDF file that was emailed to him. Like that's a CeFi risk. And then we also see in like Wormhole's case where that was a DeFi risk. You compound these two risks on top of each other just because we're trying to make DeFi work within a particular ecosystem for whatever reason. I'm not really quite sure why, rather than going and saying, let's just build it in a way that's chain agnostic to begin with. And then we don't have to do bridging. We don't have to take on any CeFi risk. We don't have to take on any unnecessary risk other than the protocol itself risk. To me, that's like structurally a better way for us to be building DeFi into the future. That's what I hope people do more in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think that we have a long way to, I do think we have a long way to go there, to be able to handle things at scale. But, I mean, real, like billions and billions and billions of dollars at scale, which is a huge, like, I guess, responsibility. And, to all the builders in this space, they have this like sort of dual risk of, building things, that need to get product market fit while not compromising on those things. And, I think it's always going to be a balance. And it'll be interesting to see which product win out. We are, at the end of the day, in L1. That's our focus. So we're trying to build a layer one that is the most decentralized, network that allows for scale. So we're always balancing that as well. And I think one of the core tenets of Avalanche is like the consensus protocol that was developed by Emin and the team there at Cornell was really all about an algorithm that allowed for more and more and more and more nodes to come without sacrificing on the time to finality of the chain. And, from a technical perspective, that's real like innovation. And if we can continue to bring those types of things across all different aspects of the space, DeFi, interoperability, et cetera, then, this space is, has a really bright future.
Would you speak a little bit to the decentralization of Avalanche and just like I guess sort of like the general overarching structure of it? Because I'm sure there's people here who don't completely understand the difference between like the P chain and the C chain, but also just like the validator structure of Avalanche and how that ties into its decentralization.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. So Avalanche is, you can call it a number of things. I like to think of it like sort of in a lot of ways as like a network of networks or an umbrella network. We have the primary network, which you can also call the primary subnet. You can use those two words interchangeably. So the primary network consists of the C, X, and P chain. The P chain is there to store the state of validation across the primary network and all the subnets. The X chain is a DAG-based chain, UTXO-based, and the C chain is the one that most people have interacted with. That's the EVM-based chain that Chair Joe Pangolin, et cetera, are deployed on. So that's the primary network. And then Avalanche has this notion of subnets. So subnets, as I mentioned, are really at the very most primitive level, any subset of the validators on the primary network that want to go and validate something. Now that thing can be one chain or multiple chains. So a subnet can consist of multiple chains, which is interesting. So let's say of the 1,400 validators on the primary network, 500 want to go validate subnet A, and 200 want to go validate subnet B, and 5 want to validate subnet C in some permission network for some supply chain thing for a private company. They could do that too. So it's very it allows for a lot of different use cases. And, I think the system was designed in a manner that, we don't want to sort of infringe upon what people can build. We want to allow people to build what they want to build. And what's also unique about Avalanche in a lot of ways is that the subnets, they're VM agnostic. So a subnet doesn't have to be an EVM based chain like Ethereum or Avalanche C-chain. It could be a custom VM, meaning you wrote it from scratch, which is cool because you could write the VM to be tailored for your specific use case. Or it could be something like a Rust-based VM. So we just deployed our Rust SDK this week that allows people to build Rust-based VMs on Avalanche subnets, which is really cool. So you can have a WASM-based, etc. So the protocol is very low level. It allows for customization, allows people to build what they want to build. They can deploy permissioned chains if they want, if they're a company and they have restrictions from regulation, or they can deploy permissionless chains. So if you want to deploy, I don't know, something like a move-based VM subnet, you can, and you can, it is effectively its own layer one. And you can, sort of invite people to deploy DeFi or NFTs and stuff like that there too. So this really is like, I think, a very sophisticated architecture. It's very low level. It allows for customization. It allows people to build what they want to build. It doesn't infringe upon or define what the future will be. It, simply is flexible enough, can, build different things there. So, yeah, that's the only other thing is that they're all bound by the Avalanche consensus, those subnets and the primary network, which is really cool because we do think that was a core innovation in terms of allowing more and more nodes to validate the network without sacrificing on speed and scalability.
So I'm curious, that design to me, it sounds like a shared security model that kind of, it's a lot of similarities with Cosmos's new thing that they've been kind of talking about or pushing about having validators of other chains to validate your chain. And so it's not so much a smart contract and not so much an app specific chain. It's like somewhere in the middle of those two things where it's like you build your own layer one, but the security is coming from another layer one of some kind of form. Are you familiar with that system? I'm curious to get your stance or your viewpoint on it.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. So shared security is a very loaded term depending on what communities you're talking to. So especially if you're talking to L2 and ETH communities, that means something to them, it means something to Cosmos community, it means something to us different, which is sort of a bigger issue in this industry in terms of terminologies meaning different things. But from our perspective, like I said before, the requirement to validate a subnet is that if you want to be a validator of subnet A, you must validate the primary network. That is a hard stop requirement. And so Cosmos, from my understanding and reading sort of what they've been pivoting to in this new release, is that it moves closer to that model that we have. And it was previously completely isolated where any zone can have any validator, etc. But I think that there is some real value gained in terms of knowing who the validators are. And, it is still permissionless in the sense that any validator can validate any subnet with the requirement that you also validate the primary network. And I think that does provide some really unique things in terms of what can be done on the primary network and the C chain and the liquidity that begets. But it's only really possible, in our opinion, to do this model, this sort of model where validators effectively grow on the primary network with linearly with the amount of subnets, if you have a consensus that can handle it, right? So, Cosmos uses Tendermint, which is classical consensus, which can only scale to 150 nodes. So they really can't use this model that we have exactly because, their quote unquote, let's call it, if it was a primary network, wouldn't be able to scale past 150 nodes. And that's not really, I think, a disputed fact. I think they would agree with that. So that's why they have a little bit of different nuances.
Are you familiar with a project called Pocket Network?
I have heard of it. I wouldn't be able to comment on any of the technicals of it, to be honest.
I was going to say like that. I met the guy behind it once. Had a good conversation with him, and one thing he said, which I was surprised about this, but maybe you'd be surprised as well, but that he had forked the Cosmos Tendermint kind of system, and he made a bunch of changes and edits to it, and he got his own network to scale to like 20 or 30,000 validators, according to what he was telling me. And so I don't know how he accomplished that. I just thought it was fascinating. I don't know what he did to accomplish that. What trade off was made or what, but it was kind of a fascinating thing. But I do agree that I think Cosmos you can't really get much higher than like 150 or 250. Maybe if you make the block times larger, like longer block times instead of like a few seconds, make it 30 seconds or a minute. You can probably get larger, but yeah.
Well, you'll have to sacrifice something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you always have to sacrifice something. Like this is the technology. You never like get everything for free. That's just not. I know we like to believe that sometimes. Everybody likes to say that they broke the trilemma or whatever, and but reality is that's never the case. You always have to deal with physics, and physics limits you to what you can and cannot do. And there's always going to be trade offs for sure.
For sure, there's always trade offs. I just think that sometimes, in a lot of ways, in all major, I guess, innovations that come across the world, it's usually when you look at something from a different lens that innovation occurs. So if you keep trying to just like, let's say you take Tendermint, you keep trying to optimize for just pure metal and speed and, optimizations of that algorithm, it's physics. Like there's only so much you could do. But if you, take a step back and take a completely different approach, which is like the sampling method that Avalanche Consensus sort of has, you can have something totally different. So, when we go from 100 to every transaction with sub-second finality. So, like it's just different, totally different thing. Just like Nakamoto consensus and classical consensus are completely different too. Nakamoto consensus is much slower than classical consensus, right? But it's also much more secure.
Right. You're trading off that decentralization for something that's higher performance. I recently saw an interview with what's his name, the guy from behind Solana. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Anatoly.
Yes, Anatoly. I heard him say something that I was a little bit shocked about. I don't know if you've heard him say it before, or you he didn't actually like explain why. I would have loved to heard him explain why. But I'd be curious if you've heard him say this or you understand, and maybe you can explain to some degree. But like, not that you're on the hook for Anatoly's comments, of course. But like, he was saying that like the completely wrong way of solving scalability of blockchains is through shards. And that's a very bold statement, and one that doesn't immediately make much sense to me why he would say such a thing. Have you heard arguments against shards and why shards can't work or won't work or whatever?
Yeah. I think they're to in a lot of ways terminology in this space. So sharding is really when most people talk about sharding in crypto, they're really talking about the way Ethereum originally was thinking about it. I don't know if whoever remembers, but that was the Ethereum roadmap, sharding. That was how they were going to scale, and that just didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen is it's really fucking hard to shard a blockchain without sort of losing a lot of kind of what you have. So, I do think that, I want to be careful with my words in a lot of ways, but I would say that sharding is in the sense that most people think of it in terms of crypto, very hard to achieve. Without sacrificing a lot. And I think that's been at least proven by the fact that, and there hasn't been much traction made there in terms of sharding.
Yeah, for sure. for sure, it's a very difficult thing to do, and I think, I mean, I associate, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I associate the AVAX to be sharding as part of their kind of like way of scaling, of like creating subnets and subchains and just kind of breaking
So
things into smaller pieces. Or do you not agree with that
you
statement?
can think you can think of it that way, like just conceptually, but in the way that like true sharding works, where you take the chain and it's one chain, and you split it up into multiple pieces, and it all comes back together as one piece. Like that's not really how a subnet works. Subnet is really like split a bunch of different executable environments, but you don't like subnet A doesn't share all the security of the speech. That's not how it works. Because you could have it, like I said, you could have a 20 validator subnet, if they so choose, or you could have a 1400 validator subnet if they so choose. So from that perspective, it's very different than like the originally envisioned sharding.
So who would you say is doing sharding in the space then? Would you say Ethereum's doing it, or would you say that some other product maybe? Like who would you say is like the product going for sharding right now? Just
Nobody. I don't think anybody's
nobody?
really doing it. I know. No, not that I know of. I know Near has been working on some dynamic sharding, they call it, but from my last checks, there wasn't a ton of progress there. I'm not sure if they've gone
Yeah.
further, but that's not really something that like true sharding, the way it was originally envisioned, nobody is really taking the ball there. I think everybody kind of realized this is too hard.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of projects who say they're working on sharding and they'll use the term, but it's interesting to hear your viewpoint and have a very different like definition of the term according, which where you're coming from makes sense too. Like I'm not saying that, of course, but like it's interesting to hear your perspective and how you look at things.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a very interesting space. There's a lot of different perspectives. I don't think I know everything by any means, and I'm just kind of been around for a long time and have heard a lot of different things and try to learn as much as I can. But ultimately, it's a fun place to be. I was telling the team this week, you can't say like it's not entertaining. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
I do have to drop it a little bit because I forgot that today is I forgot that today is a holiday, and my kids are home from school.
It's all right.
And
drop off
they're
if you
knocking
need
on the
to.
door.
Definitely appreciate you coming on and kind of like giving your viewpoints and information about AVAX and all these things. Like it's really helpful to learn more about it. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I'd also love to hear a little bit more about kind of what you guys got going on, and before I do drop, and what else we can potentially do together.
Well, the big thing we got going on right now, which is about to happen probably in the next few hours or 24 hours or so, is we're launching a new feature what we call favors. And it's a little bit comedic timing too, because the savers feature is kind of conceptually similar to like how BlockFi would give you interest accounts. Like you could put into Bitcoin, earn some more Bitcoin, and it's that straightforward and simple. You don't take on exposure to any other assets or any of these other things. You just earn Bitcoin and earn more and make more Bitcoin, right? Or earn ETH or whatever asset you kind of choose to throw into the network. And it's at a time when like all those, when CeFi basically owned that idea of like earning BTC on your BTC, there was no decentralized way to earn, in that same kind of way. When they're all kind of collapsing, BlockFi is now collapsing a second time, I guess, because of FTX. This network is launching this new feature where anybody can deploy, a layer one asset like AVAX, for example, and then earn more AVAX on your AVAX, like straight up. Like kind of like it's a little bit like staking in some sense of like what it kind of feels like, right? From a user perspective. Obviously, it's structured very differently than staking, but like the way it kind of feels like that way. And so anybody in the AVAX community can come to the network and just deploy some AVAX without buying Rune or taking on a price exposure to that, and just like earn more AVAX straight up.
So the other part of like the other end of things, like those are great new features that are coming to THORChain. But the other thing that THORChain is doing is a lot of BD type things getting into wallets, because at the end of the day, THORChain is this neutral infrastructure. It's its own app chain that validates transactions on all these other blockchains, including AVAX chain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Binance chain, and it just swaps the assets, native assets, right in the wallet, right? So that's an amazing use case, and for wallets to integrate THORChain. So that's like something that's being pushed on a lot. A lot of big wallets have been integrating THORChain and are in the process, just because the product is there. Users want to have access to these decentralized swaps and still maintain self-custody and own native assets. So we're just acting as the rails for those transactions that people can make in wallet swaps from one to another. So like, there's a lot of innovation going on both sides of things, on both like the product side, and like the savings vaults, earn BTC on your BTC, or ETH on your ETH, or an AVAX or AVAX. And then there's the other things that are being worked on, like order books and lending and borrowing and things. And then there's the integration side, which is just getting into these other products, like DEX aggregation, which we already touched on before, just a little bit. With Trader Joe and Pangolin, and then just getting into the wallets and being those neutral rails, being the decentralized change now Binance. That's the future of THORChain itself.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, I look forward to really following all the developments. And I want to really say how much I appreciate you guys bringing me on today. I'm really sorry for having to cut out early, but I really enjoyed the conversation for the last hour or so. And, hopefully, my DMs are open. People couldn't always find me on Twitter, and I'm happy to kind of engage with this community and hopefully work together, as much as possible. I like the ethos, and I've been following THORChain for a while. So really appreciate you guys having me on.
For sure. Thank you so much for coming on. And the Nine Realms team will definitely be in touch. The THORChain team will definitely be in touch. We love what you guys are doing too. And, it's just two bastions of decentralization here. And I think, kind of the future of where the space is going. So thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a good one. Have a great weekend.
You too. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
We could also, stay up for just a little bit longer if people want to come up and, just comment on anything that's happened this week. Is honestly just like, because we didn't even talk about really anything that's happened besides this.
It's too bad this week has been very boring. Like nothing happened this week at all.
Yeah, really nothing at all to comment on that I can think of.
Yeah, bro, Loki's in those. He's in BlockFi. He's at FTX. He's at. Jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like we've been illustrating how like THORChain is kind of like quote unquote like going down the list, like taking these products that CeFi had and bringing them back to the crypto sphere. What I don't think was in the plans was all of them going out of business for us to get there.
The timing is ridiculous, isn't it? Like all these things that are CeFi dominated services, like Savers, what Savers does, and like all of a sudden, like they all collapse. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And THORChain is launching now, which is just going to be full transparency of the entire system from head to toe. No person risk, right? There's no human risk to that network.
Yeah, Chad, let's talk about the launch a little bit. So there was a release, the new THORnode version that was just released last night, which I am doubting it's been adopted yet, although I didn't check. So is that just the last thing that we're waiting on, this THORnode adoption, and then we turn it on next week or so?
Yeah, right now, 16 of the nodes have not adopted the new version as of now. And so we're waiting for those last 16 to adopt. And as soon as they do, Pluto, you're welcome to disagree with me if I say something wrong here, but that we'll flip the switch, turn on Savers, and away we go.
So it could be as soon as like tonight or something potentially.
Yeah, it just however long it takes these last 16 people to do it, or actually technically, if you want to get technical about it, you actually only need 15 of the 16 because the network's going to churn in 11 hours and 9 minutes. And so if 15 do it and the last 16th guy does not, then he gets selected to get churned out of the network. So full 16 or 15 in 11 hours, I guess, if you want to get technical about it.
Highly specific. Appreciate that.
I'm excited because it's gonna be great. Like we're gonna launch this thing and hopefully it'll be real smooth. We'll hit the caps, the synth caps, over the next week or two. I'm hoping. Who knows? Like I don't really know. I'm making wild allegations at this point, but I'm hopeful that will happen. And then once it does, then we have to start making choices as a community to start increasing the caps, and then eventually once we get to 50% utilization, we can start flipping on the POL to take us the rest of the way.
Do you know, off the top of your head, I don't know, this might be a lot of math, but roughly how much liquidity that would be from the current state to maxing out the 30%, the current caps? Do we know roughly what that is?
I can figure it out for you. Just give me a second. I'll do a little bit of math. What we're going to do. Where's this?
Yeah, I'm just curious. If it takes too long, you don't bother. I'm just looking for a ballpark.
Yeah, we're at 3.74% in the Bitcoin pool. So that's about let's just call it 11% to go, right? 11% of the Bitcoin pool is 619 BTC, and right now it's 600 something. So let's call it 1,200 in value. I think I'm doing this on the top of my head, so it could be wildly wrong.
I'm pretty sure we're going to hit the security hard cap before we hit the synth utilization cap.
That's possible. Yeah, I think the synth cap for Bitcoin is 132 BTC. I think, or maybe half that. I'm not quite sure. I have to spend more time thinking about it. But we could hit the pool cap, as Pluto was just saying. But at the same time, we have right now 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 validators that are not churned into the network. So it's we're at 90 validators right now. We have another 100 that are willing to jump in. Each of them looks like the lowest person's 532,000 rune, and the highest is 950. So it's and most of it's over 700. Vast majority is over 700,000 rune. So we get those people churned in over the next few weeks, whatever. It's obviously going to add more space and more BTC and savers can load up in a sense. So it'd be interesting to see what happens for sure.
And THORSwap's interface is about ready, I assume. I saw you posted a screenshot yesterday, Chad, of the savers interface.
Yeah, I posted a teaser. It's on my Twitter if people want to see. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I think it's pretty much ready to go. I think the only thing that was not shown in that screenshot was just the final APR calculations. I'm assuming everything will be pretty much ready to launch, though. As far as I know, once this new version update is adopted. So yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I think THORSwap's good to go, and yeah, the interface is really really nice and simple. I mean, we're going to do a bunch of guides and tutorials and all of that, but I've seen people asking, how am I going to be able to do it? Can I do it with a ledger? And it's going to be the most simple thing you've ever done in the THORChain ecosystem. I mean, it literally is just connect a wallet, enter an amount, click deposit it, sign the transaction. That's it. And then just same process to withdraw when you want to. And the metrics are all really simple too. I mean, all it's really going to have to show you is what did you deposit? How much have you earned? What's your total amount to withdraw? One thing I left out there is it'll show you the fee. Pluto posted an example too of kind of showing the behind the scenes yesterday. And for example, if you're putting in 1 BTC, there's slippage happening because of the swaps that are going on in the background. So that 1 BTC ends up being 0.996 or whatever. So all of that will be pre-calculated in the interface for you for knowing exactly what you're going to have deposited and what you're able to withdraw and all of that. So yeah, really, really dead simple.
I remember like early in the conversation, Kyle was asking that Luigi about like what he thinks about DeFi and the UI UX, which is an interesting conversation. But like what you're talking about right now, like THOReau is like, to me, this is the future of DeFi. Like this is the like this when you want a very clean and simple UI UX, all these kind of things. Like what you're talking about for the Savers, feature is going to be like so like that's going to be like the standard in some sense, just because it's so clean, it's so simple. There's not much cognitive things that you have to understand. You can just say, "Oh, okay, I just hit the button and I spent some BTC and I get more." Okay, cool. That's like it's such a clean thing. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and it's also like what you were saying about just the vision for chain agnostic DeFi, right? And the way I kind of imagine that in my head, and I'm curious if what I'll illustrate is how you're thinking about it, is like, say you have this epic yield generating protocol on Avalanche, right? And you could basically have an interface similar to that one I just put, the one that's pinned up at the top, but it would be just deposit BTC, but then it goes swaps BTC to AVAX, goes through the aggregator, gets into this token derivative, whatever, into this contract, and then you've just simply deposited BTC, but you're getting exposure to some complex Avalanche, new wave DeFi 4.0 in the future, whatever it is, product. And that's kind of the vision for real chain agnostic DeFi, right? It's like you don't have to know that protocol is even on Avalanche. You just can show up with your Bitcoin or your Atom or your Doge or whatever, right?
Right. That's the way it should be. That's the way the rest of the world works, and we don't, just because of early technical limitations on how blockchains can be interoperable and work together, and that was just a very difficult problem that just took a very long period of time for us to solve as a community, as an industry. But like that's just it's almost like it's nonsensical to think about it the way that it is now. It's like that doesn't make the least bit of sense. Like if you just stand back and look at it, like, does it make sense for DeFi to be chain agnostic? Absolutely. Like obviously.
Yeah, one thing on the UX of Savers as well that's pretty crazy is just like the ability to do memoless deposits and withdrawals. It's pretty novel. Like the fact that you can literally just send Bitcoin to an address and you just automatically start earning more Bitcoin on that is pretty fucking revolutionary. And the fact that you can withdraw by just sending like another amount. We'll do story time real quick. I remember we were sitting around. It was the Nine Realms team, Chad, I think Eric Voorhees was there, and we were all talking about this. And we were saying, okay, like we need to do this in a way that we just send to an address in both directions, right? So like being able to just send to an address, like, yeah, we can figure that out. Like we know the address that it came from. We can just swap to the synth on the back end and lock it in the vault. But like, how do we do it with a withdraw? And the requirement was that like this can't be something that like you have to be able to like sign a memo with, because there's a lot of wallets that don't support memos. Like we wanted to build a product where you could literally just send Bitcoin to an address, and like the system would know what your intent is, whether you're trying to deposit or withdraw. So we were all sitting around and we just kind of came up with this design for memoless, and I think that that's one of like the innovations that is going to prove to like unlock the most potential, because you literally don't have to know anything about how THORChain works. You don't have to craft a memo. You literally just like fire off a query. You get back an address. You send your Bitcoin to it, and now you're saving on your Bitcoin. And from a UX perspective, I can't think of anything simpler than that. I mean, like how much easier can it get?
It's so simple that Redditors will think it's a scam.
I remember we were talking about that, and we were in Colorado at the time, and we floated the idea of using hierarchical deterministic wallets to accomplish this task, and so having like one wallet that's like the inbound and one wallet that's like the outbound. Like, so if you wanted to deposit, you put this address, and you wanted to withdraw, you put it in that address, and then you use the number of sats you use to define how much of like basis points you want to withdraw if you want to withdraw. But then we just came with that much simpler approach. I don't even know who did. I can't remember, to be honest. But it came with that simple approach, the much simpler approach of like, oh, if it's under this X amount for sats, then it's withdraw. If it's over that, then it's a deposit, and then it becomes so much clean and simple. It didn't require much development time. I mean, Iridanis is in the audience. He's the one that actually put the effort in to write up this feature, and relatively speaking, it was a pretty simple feature to add. It was like a couple hundred lines of code, nothing too crazy or restructuring much of anything. It just kind of works, and it just, you're right. This thing's going to prove itself to be very useful, especially when you're trying to pull, long-term Bitcoin from like people's ledgers, which just doesn't have like direct, THORChain support for ledger quite yet. Hopefully we get there at some point though. But like to do that is like incredible. I think it's gonna be humongous for the project.
Pluto, I have a quick question for you on that. So in your example, you showed how to do it memoless, but also how to do it with a UI building a memo for you, right? So are there kind of like certain instances where it makes sense to do it one way or another, or like what are kind of like the key? Like, are there some differences there?
I mean, I think that like memoless is with memos is just a little bit more programmatically straightforward. Like you send the smallest possible dust amount that you can, and you send a memo, and you're stating exactly what your intent is. With the memo list, there's like you have to send a specific amount to tell it how much basis points to withdraw, and that amount changes depending on like which chain. So like ETH, the dust amount is different from BTC, it's different from BNB. So I just think from like if your wallet supports signing out UTXOs, you might as well just use a memo. It just makes it a lot more straightforward, like, to think about. Like if I'm just thinking like if I'm a developer building this, but like with the new quote deposit endpoint and the quote withdraw endpoint, it'll tell you exactly, like if you tell it, okay, I want to like withdraw 100% of my position on my BTC position, and here's my address. It'll be like, cool, send this amount to this address, and you don't even need to include a memo. So we made it really easy for you to do it either way. Like we send you back the memo, but we also send you back the dust amount that you can send to withdraw that exact amount. So from that perspective, it's just like the feature could not be any easier to interact with. And that was really like an important design consideration of like the entire API, and just like how you interact with it. And yeah, to Chad's point, like there's just been through so many iterations just on like those little minute details about like how do you interact with the product. But like I think we really settled on something that's just the really like the simplest possible thing. I wanted to talk real quick about just like what the expectations should be for UIs around launch. So I think that like Chad T, to what you were saying before, like what the THORswap product is going to have, I think that's a great MVP of the savers, is like basically just like here are all the vaults that you can deposit into. Here, like basically we have an endpoint that will show like if that vault is already maxed out. So it is possible that like a user can go to deposit to a vault and like won't be able to. And then basically from there, like they should go and just like punch in an amount and in for a token. And so say like they're going to deposit 1 BTC. So we can show you exactly how much like entry fees that you're being assessed when you enter that vault. That's basically the slippage that you pay to enter the vault. And then when you go to like show a user their positions or like what their redeemable amount, that quote, that withdraw endpoint will tell you exactly how much that you can redeem at this exact point in time. And that takes into account the exit fees as well as the outbound fees. And so it's really nice. Like users will be able to see, oh, I can withdraw my, 1.2 Bitcoin right now, and they'll get back exactly 1.2 Bitcoin. So it eliminates a lot of the guesswork. And so that was like a, sort of like 11th hour optimization that we made. And then, but just on the subject of like yield rates, it's still something that we're trying to determine the best methodology to like to basically instruct UIs on like what rates to show to end users. I think that there's going to be a number of ways to do this. We can go and we can take the oldest saver and look at their yield and then extrapolate that out over, a year and give like a rough APR. We can also do like back testing where someone can say, when that person goes to make that one BTC deposit, we could do like a little back test and tell them like, hey, if you had entered this pool with this amount, like if you had deposited one BTC 90 days ago, here's how much you would have made and here's what your yield would have been. And I think back testing is a little bit more of a transparent and a little bit more of an honest way of doing it than saying like, here's the rate somebody else who got in earlier than you was. Because the more people that are in the pool, like the more the rates are going to go down. So like showing you someone else's APR as like what you would get is not necessarily like, that's not necessarily true. So there's a lot of trade-offs between like, basically having like the most up-to-date information accurate and also the most user-friendly way of presenting that information. So for right now, we're recommending that UIs don't publish any rates for any of the pools because we think that we need at least like 30 to 60 days of data from the real world to actually like look at the different rates and look at the different calculations and figure out what's going to be the best way. So I noted in the screenshot that you had posted there above, like the earn APR percent coming soon. Like I would just say like, basically like that needs to be pushed out for like at least a month until there's enough data to make the accurate calculations and to compare the different methodologies against each other.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'll definitely bring that up with THORswap.
Yeah.
It's always a tricky thing to like talk about what people can expect for yield because it does fluctuate and you don't want to give people false impressions. Like you want to be honest and clear and as transparent and real with people as possible, but at the same time you really can't tell them what the yield is going to be in the future because you can only base upon what happened in the past, which is obviously not always directly correlational. So it's a tough thing to deal with. But you got at some level you got to come up with some number and give it to people at some point.
Yeah. I think it's fine to say like past 90 days performance, and then just give them like an average of all the savers in the past 90 days or the oldest saver or whatever. But like, I still like the idea of like when you go to deposit and you enter in like how much you're about to deposit, it'll tell you like how much you would have made if you had made that deposit 90 days ago. Because we could take the pool depths 90 days ago and then add what you say you're depositing now, add that in as of 90 days ago, and then look at the pool depths now, and then basically get a delta between the two. And I think that's like going to be really like the most accurate way is like to tell people like basically based on historical performance rather than like try to make some extrapolation into the future. I just think that extrapolating into the future is going to set people up for failure, and it's not going to set the right expectations around what the true yields are going to be.
Yeah, agree with that. Because I mean, like we talked about this last week too. That all yields inherent, like they're always backwards looking, but people look at them as forward looking, right? And that's a good way to communicate. That it's a good way to communicate the same information, just in a different way that frames it in more accurately. So if someone's thinking about it as a backward-looking metric rather than a forward-looking metric, because obviously there's no way to predict what will happen in over the next year, especially. So good call out on that.
What we could do is that each time the network puts like yield into the Bitcoin savers, for example, it emits actually a donation event on the chain itself, and Midgard already supports that event type, which is why we're using it. It didn't require extra work or whatever, and it works. In some sense, it is a donation into the group anyway. So, anyways, like you can take that number and you can sum it up per day. Like, what's the total number of of synthetic Bitcoin was put into the pool from a yield perspective. And then you can look at that number on we can actually have a chart that just shows that number day to day, right? To show what the actual income of the actual pool is. And then you can have another number that is like, well, relative to the how much of this is getting split per BDC, like per one BDC, how much yield is that of this yield for the day? If you have one BDC in the network, like what are you getting, blah, 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 something like this. And so you can kind of create a long-term graph that will show the income of that pool. And you can even see just like, is it making more money because the yield is increased, or is it making more money because people have left, right? And there's less people kind of collecting the yield, and therefore the yield increases for those individuals. And so like that would kind of give you that kind of sense of like, what is the actual yield generating, and then how many people that being spread across of what value. Like you could do that totally with Midgard by itself without making any more changes to the core protocol.
We have been on stage for almost an hour and a half here, so let's let if there's anyone that has questions or whatever, let's let them come up. There's someone that's been waiting for a while, and if anyone else has anything, hit the request button to come up. So we have Naveen Kumar. Hey, are you there? You gotta unmute yourself. Hey, you there, man? Or guess not.
Well, whenever he comes back, he's willing to. He's okay to talk. Is there anybody else in the audience who wants to come up and ask a question or bring a topic? Or
no one else has requested.
Okay.
Come on, no one else has questions about savers. It's really that simple. There's just
we got K coefficient and crypto XC from Thor Wallet. Anthony, all right, there we go. We got some of the crowd up here. All right, yeah. So K coefficient.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Yo.
Are we the savers? Is it just going to be BTC right now, or are we doing all layer one coins?
It's every asset on THORChain actually.
Oh, really?
No, it's not. It's not. No, it's only gas assets.
Yeah, only a coin. No token.
Yeah. The primary asset per chain.
No, I don't think so.
Look at the handler logic for the add liquidity, and there's a function that says is gas asset.
Oh, interesting. I thought POL was only for gas assets, but that savers was going to be live for every token that basically any synth could be deposited into a vault. That's not the case.
I think that might be problematic for like lower smaller pools. It creates the opportunity for manipulation and there could be some security related issues there.
I mean, there are L1s that we have for bigger pools. We have L1 pools that are smaller than other tokens on other chains. I don't follow that logic.
What I would like to see happen in the long term is just to get rid of all the other tokens, because they're just taking up space in the security, and we don't really need them anyway. Now that we have DEX aggregation, we don't even need them at all.
Well, what about stables? Because I think stables is what people really care about anyways in terms of single-sided yield for tokens, and those would be staying, right?
Yeah, stables would be staying. If we go down the lending route, then we would need stables. If we don't go down that lending route, then we don't necessarily need stables, although we could still have them to have them. But then I'd be hesitant about like getting the POL involved with some stables, just because of like, the risk to the protocol it would take on from holding those kind of assets.
Yeah, especially right.
Yep.
Sorry, real quick before we move on though, just part of that question, isn't it though that when POL kicks in, that's going to first be just BTC, if I recall?
Yeah, POL is like a per pool enabled thing, right? There are some people. For me, I'd rather just have it just be any gas asset, and I'm fine with that. personally, but there were some people within Nine Realms who wanted to see it kind of wanted to pick which pools should earn POL, which pools should not. Which to me, that becomes a governance issue, a problem. But like,
to be clear, we didn't want to be the ones to choose, but we wanted to have node operators vote on that. But our recommendation would have been for that to just be BTC to start with, and then maybe we can roll out, Ethereum in a couple months, and then, all the rest of them later. But I think it's conservative to take the approach with BTC, and we don't even have to like roll that out until we actually hit those caps, which we'll see how quickly that happens. But we should be ready to start the vote for POL as soon as like we see some of those caps being hit.
Yeah, we may not even hit those with the POL kind of cap just because the pool itself can't take infinite liquidity. But there's also that chance that like maybe somebody who's currently a dual-sided LP who likes to be a saver instead, and so they withdraw their capital as a dual-sided and they re-enter as a single-sider. That could happen. I don't know. Maybe people will want to do that. Maybe they won't. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because I have a large Rune Binance Chain LP position, and I was curious to look at possibly single-sided staking the BNB, and then running a node with my other Rune on the other side of it. I was just thinking about that, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. Like that would actually be great for the network in a sense, because you're taking out from the room from the pool, which is a good thing in this context, and you're putting it onto the bond side, which is even better.
Right.
A better allocation of room in a sense, because we need more room on the bond side anyway. So you could totally do that if you wanted to. It's up to you.
But we could do that potentially like this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not just BTC for savers.
Yeah, it's going to be any gas asset, which it's just basically the primary asset per chain. So it's Atom, AVAX, BTC, Litecoin, Doge, Bitcoin Cash, those things.
Yeah, Doge I think would be a big one. Could be a potentially big one in the future. But after we hit the synth caps, then all of the node operators will need to vote on POL for each pool, correct?
POL is a global thing. It's not on a per. Oh, sorry. We enable or disable it on an individual level, but the parameters of how POL works is more global. But before we enable POL, we want to get to at least 50% of synth utilization via the pool depth. And the reason why that is because if you started it before that point, you would create a net. Whenever somebody entered on savers, like from BDC or from BNB or whatever, it would create a net sell pressure on the Rune asset, because you'll be putting in $1 BNB and you'd create like $1.50 of sell pressure on the Rune asset, versus when it's 50-50, it's like $1 in and $1 of buy pressure and $1 of sell pressure. It's like a net neutral thing, which is probably better.
Yeah, I get that. I'm trying to visualize what the future looks like for savers, for retail users, and when you do start hitting those caps, and when protocol and liquidity comes in, like what's it going to take to get, if people are waiting with 100 Bitcoin to put into savers, we need to wait for the node operators to vote on deploying that protocol
right.
liquidity.
Correct. That's going to require a vote from the node operators to do that at some point. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, and that's all part of the THORChain strategy of launching these features, where it starts off small and then ramps up slowly over time to make sure that there's no big errors with the feature, or that things work as intended. Starting off with POL, it's always better to start smaller than it is to start bringing in 100 BTC slugs right away.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
I get that. I'm just it might be useful to have like a similar like flow chart or something visual for users in the future, so there's not any confusion when you do start running up on those self-imposed caps, so people aren't freaking out. Like,
Great.
you know what I
Well,
mean?
once POL kicks in,
We're
won't
not
it
blowing up
be like,
Discord with complaints.
once POL does kick in, won't the caps be like a lot less relevant? I mean, there's still the
Yeah.
overall caps, right? But the like factoring just like the synth part, it's like essentially kind of capless at that stage, assuming there's
Yes, it's
node bond and all that.
the synth cap would be like, I'm speaking hypotheticals right now, but like the synth cap itself would be like 55%, and the POL target would be like 50%, let's just say, right? And so when the synths, get up to 55% or beyond 50 more accurately, the POL starts deploying runes to the pools, which pushes the synth, utilization back down to 50 or 49 or whatever. And so like effectively you have no synth cap in any real sense, and like the network just kind of becomes the counterbalance to make sure everything is like on the level, whatever.
Well, until you hit the max rune deposit on POL.
Right.
Yeah, there's that cap that we have purposely put in there just to have a soft launch of that feature, and then also you have the cap on how much liquidity the pools themselves can have, right? So it's going to have some at that, and then the pools are 100% full, and like basically almost all of the yield is going to the nodes, almost none of the yields going to the pools. Kind of the incentive pendulum does it swings in the direction it should. So yeah, it's going to be it's Cow said, it's going to be a process to scale up the feature over the next few months or so.
And all of the POL stuff has been coded in, right?
Yes, it's already live.
Okay, awesome.
It's just disabled right now. At some point we can enable it when we feel like we need to. But for right now, we're just going to launch savers, and it's very well possible that we won't even need POL because we won't even get to that level of synth cap that we might hit the pool cap first before we hit the synth cap.
Yeah, that's right.
Possible.
Okay.
We also brought up Crypto XZ from Thor Wallet. Hey.
Hi guys, happy
Hey.
to be here. Excited to hear about savers. We have been working about this as well. I have a couple of things that come to my mind, and thanks for the clarification from Nine Realms. I think the new endpoint that is going to come available is going to be super useful, not only for us, but I think for any other wallet that's trying to integrate. So that's going to be very, very good for adoption. The question I had was related to this is somehow going to affect the calculation of the yield on the pools. So right now you were saying that the yield for the savers is something that needs a bit of extra time so that historical data is accumulated. But is it in the planning as well to do some endpoint for the pools as well, so that this calculation or the separation between the APR that goes to savers and the APR that goes to pools, is that something that is in the plan as well?
You're saying like the same as we have events that say how much yield was made in the savers, do we want similar events for how much yield was made in the pools? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so right now there's been a bit of freedom on the calculation, and some people decide to take 7 days, 30 days, and like now I think we're getting into a consensus of using increase in Luvi and so on. But now with the addition of the APR coming for or going to savers, this is going to be some calculation that at the beginning will be taken over by the interfaces. So what is the yield that goes to a pool? So if you are in BTC Rune, what is the APR there versus what's the APR as a single yield? So I think it will also be very helpful in terms of adoption if this is simplified, right? Like right now with this new endpoint, people can just see for savers, not now, but eventually, right? What are they going to get? So I think that would be also an interesting thing if that's enabled for later once that separation happens and savers goes live.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I don't think it's particularly hard even. The math should be pretty straightforward and simple, I think. When you're trying to compare dual-sided versus single-sided, in a sense, in either yield.
Awesome.
And the
Cool,
dual-sided
man.
what's fascinating is that the dual-sided, how much the dual-sided is getting versus the single-sided is getting is like relational to the depth of each, right? So if the dual-sided is 90% and the savers is 10%, then the dual-sided income is not too different than what it is today. Like it's a little bit different, but not too different. By a little bit more than we're making today, but not that much. But if it was inversed and it was 90% savers and 10% dual-sided, which we would never see that because the centralization would be extremely high, but just speaking just hypothetically here, then the yield for dual-sided would be like astronomically high because they're getting half the yield of 90% of the value, right? Plus their own capital, whatever they provided, which would just be like crazy high APYs for the dual-sided. So it's going to be interesting to see how it kind of pans out. But basically, the more savers we have in the network, basically the higher the yield gets for dual-sided as a relationship between the two.
I think another thing that is very interesting is like now anyone could actually just even from their own wallet just access to savers. So that I think is going to create some new interface that we have not expected so far, which is just send a transaction, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually hope that somebody builds a website that's just like single purpose savers, and you don't even necessarily have to brand it THORChain or whatever, just call it whatever it is. And like there's no wallet integrations. You don't have to like plug in your wallet. It just So I got rug there. I got a phone call. So we'll build this website where you can just like put in like, oh, I want to deploy, X amount of Bitcoin or withdraw X amount of Bitcoin or something like this, and it just tells you like either shows you like a QR code where you can just like scan on your phone and like.
Spammers are after Chad, but yeah, that's something we talked about a little bit. Just like the simple UX of just showing the QR code, and then you just any wallet can basically just do a send with the QR code and interact with savers. So that is something we're definitely looking forward towards. And also everything that's coming out of Thor Wallet, Thor Wallet development has been going great. It seems like from this end, and hopefully people are happy with the way that that's going, because I've been using it personally. I like Thor Wallet, so it's great mobile interface, and you guys have been doing a great job.
Thanks. Yeah, we're excited for everything that's coming up recently. I think the situation, the environment, and like how things has been managed is just aligning perfectly. And I think now the message is for us to share, being custodial, doing single-sided, like all of these things are like, I always see it as an infrastructure play first, because like we might want to have some stuff done, but if there's not the infrastructure there, I think that's why Ethereum was at the beginning taking so much of the DeFi market share, because they built the infrastructure first. And now I think this cross-chain infrastructure that we're building as THORChain community is going to enable not only for Bitcoin, but like many other assets, right? We're completely off DeFi. So you can now start imagining some infrastructure for assets like Dogecoin or things like that were not possible before. So I think that's pretty exciting. And it's also pretty exciting that that could be transferred to a mobile device. So looking forward to the things that are coming now.
100%. Well, let's just wrap up with these last few questions. So, Anthony, hey.
G'day. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I just got a question about Thor savers. So correct me if I'm wrong. If you're an LP in an LP position at the moment and you go to withdraw a decent amount, there is some kind of delay due to security reasons. With the Thor savers, will there be that same type of delay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's all I had.
Cool. And KJ?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Just had a quick question. Don't want to take up too much time. It's not really too technical, and I apologize if you guys have already gone over this. Pardon?
Sorry, Coefficient, can you
Yeah,
mute for us?
he's
I just
muted.
took him off.
Go ahead, KJ.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, great to see all the developments. Really exciting stuff. So just two pretty simple questions. Is this an intermediary step on the way to kind of earning yield natively on Rune as well? So that's the first question. And then the second question is, could you guys shed a little bit more clarity on how with Thor savers how the withdrawals would work? So let's say I understand that the idea is to do this for the long term, but just given the obviously economic environment in crypto and stuff right now, people are probably a little bit on edge. So just knowing how that would work, a little bit more clarity would be great. Just like if I wanted to take, let's say, put like one BTC in the pool, and then 3 months later I decide I want to take it out. Like, what's the penalties for that, or the payments? Are they allowed to be taken out penalty free and leave the BTC in, or just a little bit more clarity would be great.
Yeah. So the first question about like pathway to Rune on savers. So as of now, there's not really an intention to add Rune as an option for savers purposes, and the reason why that is because it's like a little bit like picking yourself up by your own belt in a sense. Like it becomes very dangerous when protocols become like rely on their own asset for everything. Like Mango Markets was an example of that, where they used their own asset as collateral, which became problematic for obvious reasons. Same thing with like FTX. They built their own token. They lent out other people's tokens, the other people's like Bitcoin and whatever, and they said, "Oh, we'll just back it with FTT and it's fine." It's like, well, no, you don't have the liquidity to support such a thing, which was kind of shown to be the problem, a few days ago. And so, in addition to that, like we want to draw in new capital into the environment, right? We want to take exogenous capital, whether that be Bitcoin, Ethereum, or AVAX, whatnot, and we want them to basically sell their asset, the Bitcoin, and to acquire Rune, right? Which effect is what is, in some sense, that's exactly what's happening with savers. So that's why it creates a buy pressure on the Rune asset whenever somebody deploys savers. The opposite happens when you use like Rune as your savers like asset. So if somebody were to add Rune as their thing, that would create sell pressure on the Rune asset, which is always something we don't really want to create. And so it's not about so much like Rune being the center of anything. It's more of like it's there because it has to be. The center really, in some sense, is Bitcoin and Ethereum and AVAX and Atom and like all these other assets, and providing them value, which inherently by providing them value causes their capital to effectively leave the Bitcoin ecosystem, and the value being transferred into the Rune ecosystem, which is obviously something we want to see as Rune holders. So I don't think there's much of an intention to use Rune as collateral or as for savers or whatnot. We want all that value of Rune to be staying either in the pools as a dual-sided liquidity, because then you're providing a value in that sense, or even better is throwing into a node and providing more capital for the security side of the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah. And what was the second question you were asking? I forget what it was.
Oh, the second question was just a little bit of clarity on how, if you deposit, let's say, one BTC in the pool, how does it work if you decide in 3 months to take it out? Is there a penalty? Is there a lockup period? And if I decide to keep it in there, can I keep on taking out the yield regularly and leaving the BTC pretty easily? Just a little more clarity on that.
Sure, of course. There's no penalty in a sense, and there's no minimum. You don't have to keep it in the system for like a minimum of X days or something like this. There are swap fees as you remove. So if you decide to remove like one BTC, for example, you're going to get back 0.9 something 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 something. So there are always going to be swap fees when you enter and when you exit. But outside of that, it's pretty much you can do whatever you want. And so if you want to just like throw one BTC in there and like every month go in and take out whatever yield it was, like say you earned 0.01 BTC in a month or whatever the value actually is, you can choose to withdraw that 0.01 minus the swap fees of that 0.01, which will probably be very, very, very small, and then get your whatever the remainder that is, while your one BTC initial deposit just kind of continues in there, keeping a yield.
A good way to think about it is it's like a double swap entering or exiting. So it's just the swap of like a rune to BTC swap, just twice the slippage of that. So a small swap will obviously be really low on slip, or a small withdrawal or deposit will be really low on slip. So entering really slowly will make you pay less fees. Also, exiting more slowly, you pay less fees having to enter or exit. So it's literally just a double swap, entering or exiting. It's just synth burning and then swapping to or from asset.
Which will probably also stop somebody from deploying 100 BTC into the pool in one go. Like that would just be the swap fees, and that would be probably very large. And so the same thing on pulling out too. You're not going to pull out 100 BTC in a single transaction. That would be very, very costly in terms of fees. That kind of slip-based model kind of protects the network from any harsh or sudden movements in a sense.
Also, just want to highlight how awesome of a user experience this creates. Back to like what Pluto was saying, just about making everything as like simple, and like why would you not use it? How can just getting it integrated everywhere? Like this creates so much less to explain to the user, right? Like there's no weird lockup, there's no weird penalty, there's no there's just like not much you need to know about the whole thing, right? It's just like deposit, earn, withdraw, whatever. I mean, the only thing is that there's entry and exit fees, and other than that, it's like can hardly think of. I mean, of course, there's protocol risk, and people need to understand that. But in terms of just the product itself, it's so dead simple. You just put in BTC or whatever gas asset, and you earn in that asset, and you can do whatever you want. It's pretty great.
That was literally one of the main goals of the feature, was to keep it as cognitively simple as possible. Because we made that choice early on. We thought about, we could do this, we could do that, we could do, we thought of like a bunch of different ideas. But like in the end, we're like, the goal here is to keep it as cognitively simple to understand and to implement and to utilize, and not have to worry about if this happens and that happens, and what if these scenarios, this, that, like just keep it so simple, so clean. The cleaner, the better. That's kind of how we pushed it.
Cool, guys. That was a great space today. We had an hour with Luigi, and then we had an hour just talking about Thor savings on the back end of it. So yeah, I think that was pretty good. We can wrap up. Any final words from anybody?
Well, I mean, there's the one elephant in the room. Maybe just to wrap up with some philosophical stuff. I would love to hear maybe get a Chad B rant out of this. But like this timing, everything going on is exactly why THORChain exists, right? So I just feel the timing is so right for people to really be onboarded, and whether that's all of us here in this community, just like helping people onboard, helping spread the word. Obviously, there's so much happening by the core team, Nine Realms, THORSwap, all the other interface projects in the ecosystem to get deeper integrations and really make THORChain the back end. But like now is the time for a flood of users to find THORChain, and this thing is here, and it already exists, and it's magic. And I just think it's time. So let's go get it.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how it's like, to the outside world, they see what's happening here, and they're like, "Oh, look at crypto! Crypto's terrible. Everybody lost their money. Blah blah blah." Right? From the outside looking in, they don't understand the nuance here. And for us, we're just like, "Yeah, look at CeFi. It's a complete clusterfuck of a situation. This is the reason why we got into this space to begin with, to get away from this like fucking horse shit and black box finance and all this fucking this terrible fucking bullshit that makes no sense at all." And this is totally like, we can take a moment to kind of like applaud ourselves to some degree as a community, just because we've been proven yet again why it's good to have a fully open, fully transparent, fully available system. No borders, no KYC, no permission, no censorship. Why that's so important. And we just get proven like time and time again. It's over and over again. And we'll keep on kind of like taking that little fist pumping action, because like we just get proven again and again that we're right about this design, this idea, what we're trying to accomplish. It's just there's no other way to cut the cake.
Let's get it, Chads. Sweet.
All
All
right.
right. Well, I guess we're looking forward to a launch of Savers next week. So I'm
If anybody
super looking forward to that.
knows who a validator is and they haven't updated, they're one of the last 16, get on their asses. If you know somebody who's a validator, get on their ass and say, fucking update the 99 because I want to see Savers launch. Let's get it going.
Awesome, guys. Well, these spaces are recorded. This will be put up on YouTube, and you can check out the conversation with Luigi from Ava Labs, and also just us talking about Thor savings. And the whole archive of these things is up on Runebase, and also now being uploaded on the Nine Realms YouTube channel. So appreciate you guys coming out. Also, if you haven't followed CryptoXZ up here, and also Pluto, definitely follow them for all kinds of THORChain content that you're not going to see anywhere else. CryptoXZ is with growth officer at Thor Wallet, and Pluto is one of the core devs of the protocol, and a member of the Nine Realms team. So shout outs to them. All right.
Later, guys.
Well, we'll see you guys
Great
next
space,
week.
guys. See ya.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.